Greetings and welcome to a special presentation of Charles Dickens' classic, A Christmas Carol. 151 years after its publication, it's still one of the season's favorites. WCCM extends its holiday greetings by presenting the new Garrett Players production of A Christmas Carol, featuring the voices of Gary Thomas Keating, with a special guest appearance by yours truly, Jimi Carter. Now sit back, relax, and imagine, if you would, 19th century London at Christmas time.
Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatsoever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner, Scrooge. Scrooge signed it. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know what is particularly dead about a doornail. I would regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade, but still, you will permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew Marley was dead? Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and Marley had been partners for, I don't know how many years. Scrooge was Marley's sole executor, sole administrator, sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral. The mention of Marley's funeral brings us back to the point from which we started. There is no doubt whatsoever that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of this story. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood years afterwards above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, secret and solitary and self-contained as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, made his thin lips blue, and his eyes red. Nobody ever stopped him in the streets to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Mr. Scrooge, how are you?" But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing that he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting-house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal. The door of Scrooge's office was open so that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who sat copying letters in a freezing little cell. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his office, and the clerk knew that surely, if he were to come for more coal, that would be his last act in Scrooge's employ.
"A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!"
exclaimed Scrooge's nephew Fred, interrupting their work and breaking the quiet of the office. Replied Uncle Scrooge, "Bah, humbug."
"Christmas a humbug? Surely you don't mean that, Uncle."
"I do. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough."
"Come then, what reason have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough."
"Bah, humbug."
"Don't be cross, Uncle, please."
"What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas, out upon Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer? If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart he should.
Oh, Uncle!
Nephew, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine.
Keep it, but you don't keep it.
Let me leave it alone, then. Little good has it ever done you. Much good will it ever do you.
I have derived good from many things from which I have not profited. I dare say Christmas among the rest. But I have always thought of Christmas time, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women open their shut-up hearts freely, and think of people below them as fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on separate journeys. And therefore, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say God bless it.
Cratchit applauded Fred's speech, but realized immediately the folly of his action. Let me hear another sound from you, Mr. Cratchit, and you'll celebrate your Christmas by losing your situation. Oh, you're quite a powerful speaker, nephew. I wonder that you don't go into Parliament.
Oh, don't be angry, Uncle. Come dine with me and my new wife tomorrow.
I'll see you first in...
But why? Why won't you come, Uncle?
Why did you get married?
Because I fell in love.
Because I fell in love. Good afternoon.
Nay, Uncle, but you never came to see me before I married. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?
Good afternoon.
I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can't we be friends?
Good afternoon.
Oh, Uncle, I am sorry, with all my heart, to find you so resolute. I have made the trial an homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Good afternoon.
And a Happy New Year, too.
Good afternoon! Fred left the office without an angry word. He stopped as he was leaving to bestow the greetings of the season on Cratchit and his family. As cold as the clerk was, he returned the greetings warmly. Scrooge, overhearing this exchange, remarked to himself, "Oh, there's another fellow, my clerk, but with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family to feed, talking about a Merry Christmas, so I'll retire to Bedlam." As Cratchit saw Fred out, he let another man in. He was a well-dressed, portly gentleman, with an air of humor about him. With his hat off and books and papers in his other hand, he stood in Scrooge's office and bowed cordially to Mr. Scrooge. "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night." Oh, I have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner." Liberality? "At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries and comforts, sir." "Are there no debtors' prisons?" "Plenty of prisons." "And the union workhouses, are they still in operation?" "They are, though I still wish I could say that they were not." "Oh, good. I was afraid from what you'd said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it." "They scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude. So a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. What shall I put you down for?" "Nothing." "Oh, you wish to be anonymous.
I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, sir, that is my answer. I don't make merry at Christmas myself, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help support the establishments I mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. But many can't go there, and many would rather die. Oh, if they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Excuse me. Besides, it's not my business. It's enough for a man to know his own business and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, sir.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue the matter, the gentleman left. Cratchit did not dare look up as Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself. The time passed ever so slowly towards night. The afternoon grew colder and darker as a thick, icy fog blanketed the city. But then the officer's long, dreary moments of silence were suddenly broken by the cheery voice of a young boy just outside the window singing, God bless you, merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior. Scrooge seized his ruler and ran to the window with such fury that the young boy fled in terror and disappeared into the swirling fog. At length, the closing hour rang out on the neighboring clock. Cratchit snuffed out his candle, put on his hat, and looked expectantly at Scrooge. You'll want the whole day off tomorrow, I suppose? If quite convenient, sir. It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to stop you 1/2 crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work. It's only once a year, sir. A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And merry. Bah! Scrooge left the office with a scowl. Cratchit closed up in a twinkling, and with the ends of his muffler flying in the wind, ran home as quickly as can be to make merry with his happy family. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner, Jacob Marley, whom you will remember was surely dead. They were old enough now, and dreary enough as well, for nobody lived in them but Scrooge, the other rooms below him being let out as offices. The fog and frost hung heavily about the house, swirling round the front door. Now, there was nothing particularly unusual about the knocker on this door, except that it was very large. So it is hard to explain that as Scrooge placed his key in the door, he saw gazing back at him, not a knocker, but the illuminated face of his old partner, Jacob Marley, 7 years dead. As he looked in awe at this sight, it just as suddenly turned back into a knocker. He was startled, to be sure, but after giving it a moment's thought, he turned the key and entered the hall, stopping only long enough to look over his shoulder before he slammed the door with a great bang. Bah! Lighting his candle, he made his way up the dark, dark stairs to his rooms. Now, darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked that. But in the gloom, he remembered Marley's face enough that he made his way quickly through his rooms to see that all was well. Sitting room, bedroom, slumber room. Oh, nobody under the bed. Oh,
Nobody in the closet, and nobody in my dressing gown. A small fire in the grate, a little saucepan of gruel. Ooh. All as it should be. Good. He closed the bedchamber door and double-locked it, which was not his custom. Thus locked in, he dressed for bed and sat close to the tiny fire to take his gruel. As he settled into the chair, he was startled to see that in place of the usual decoration on the painted tiles around the fireplace opening, he thought he saw instead the face of Marley. Humbug! Humbug, I tell you! He leapt from the chair and took several nervous turns around the room, and then returned to his chair. As he threw his head back, his glance rested upon a small, disused bell that hung in the room. To his astonishment and dread, as he watched the bell, he saw it begin to swing. Ding, 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 ding. Ever so slowly and softly at first, but soon it began to ring out loudly. Ding, 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 glang, 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 glang. And so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute, or a minute at most, but it seemed an hour. Glang, 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 glang. But then the bell stopped all at once. This was followed by a clanking noise, deep, deep down below, as if someone was dragging a heavy chain through the cellar. Scrooge remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open below with a booming sound. And then he heard the chains much louder and closer still, chains dragging on the floorboards below. Then, coming up the stairs and straight toward his door. It's humbug still! I won't believe it! His manner changed, however, when, without a pause, something, I tell you, came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. The dying flame leaped up as though it cried, I know him! Marley's ghost! And fell back again. Marley, the same face, the very same. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead, eyes wide open, but perfectly motionless. Marley in his wig and pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights, and boots. The hair, coattails, and boot tassels were curiously stirred, however, as if by breath or hot air. And a chain he drew about him was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like the tail of a serpent. It was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. The ghost's body was transparent, so that Scrooge could see the 2 buttons on his waistcoat behind. Although Scrooge could see all this clearly before him, he still fought against his senses. "Ah, now," said Scrooge, "what do you want of me?" "Much." Marley's voice, no doubt. "Who are you?"
Ask me who I was.
"Very well. Who were you, then? You're very particular for a ghost."
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Can you sit down?
I can.
Do it, then.
You don't believe in me.
I don't.
What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?
I don't know.
Why do you doubt your senses?
Oh, because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There may be more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Mercy, mercy, dreadful apparition. Why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do, I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide, and if that spirit goes forth not in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me!
The ghost stood, shook its chains, and raised such a cry that Scrooge scrambled to his feet and cried out, "You're chained! Jacob, tell me why!"
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Would that you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself. It was full as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since.
Scrooge looked about himself, but could see nothing. He was confused. "Marley, oh, Jacob Marley, tell me more, but speak comfort to me, Jacob."
Please, I have none to give, nor can I tell you what I would. Very little time is permitted me. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting-house, mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole. And weary journeys lie before me, oh, captive bound and double-ironed, not to know, that no space of regret can make amends for one life's opportunity misused. Yet such was I, oh, such was I.
But Jacob, you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. Oh, at this time of year I suffer most. Why did I walk through crowds of fellow beings with my eyes turned down and never raise them to the blessed Christmas star? Were there no poor homes to which its light might have conducted me?
But Jacob, oh, Jacob, hear
me, my time is nearly gone.
I will, I must. But don't be hard upon me, Jacob, please. And don't be thoury, Jacob, pray.
Oh, how it is that I appear before you in a shape that you can see tonight, I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. That has been no light part of my penance. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate. A chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer.
You are always a good friend to me, thank thee.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? If it is, I'd rather not.
Without their visit, you cannot hope to escape the path that I tread. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I take them all at once and have it over with?
Expect the second on the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more. And for your own sake, remember what has passed between us.
Oh, Ebenezer Scrooge! The apparition moved backwards from Scrooge, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. Scrooge followed to the window. As Marley's ghost raised its hand, Scrooge became aware of confused noises in the air, and after listening for a moment, he realized what he could hear was the dreadful sounds of wailing and moaning. Marley turned and joined the dreadful dirge, and then floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Looking out the window, Scrooge saw the air filled with phantoms, every one of them wearing chains like Marley's own. Closing the window and turning back to the room, Scrooge examined the door through which the ghost had entered. It was still doubled locked. Bug? Then, from the fatigue of the day, the emotion he had undergone, and his glimpse of the invisible world, much in need of repose, he went straight to bed and fell asleep upon the instant. When Scrooge awoke, he could scarcely make out the window across the room. He scrambled from bed to see what time it was on the neighboring clock tower. It was still so foggy and dark that he couldn't see the face of that clock. As he tried to determine the hour, the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters, so he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell rang on from 6 to 7, from 7 to 8, and regularly on up to 12, then stopped. 12? That cannot be! It was past 2 when I went to bed. The clock must be broken. Oh, or is it possible that I have slept through a whole day and far into another night? The idea being an alarming one, Scrooge thought it over and over and over, and the more he thought, the more perplexed he was. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge went back to bed, pulled the curtains closed, and continued in this state until the chimes had rung 3 quarters. Then, of a sudden, he remembered that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour had passed. At last, the hour rung out. 1 o'clock? The hour itself. And nothing. But Scrooge spoke too soon, for no sooner had he spoken than light flashed up in the room, and the curtains of his bed were drawn aside. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. And Scrooge found himself face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and a blush was on its cheek. The arms and hands and legs were long and muscular and bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, trimmed with summer flowers. Round its waist was bound a lustrous, sparkling belt, and in its hand it held a single branch of fresh green holly. As Scrooge gazed upon the figure, it seemed to melt away from view, but just as suddenly it brightened again in sharp contrast to the surrounding darkness. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a clear jet of light by which all this was visible. Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me? Said Scrooge. I am, replied the spirit. Who and what are you then? I am the ghost of Christmas past. Long past? No, your past. May I be so bold as to inquire what business brought you here? Your welfare and reclamation. Take heed, rise, and walk with me. It put out its strong hand as it spoke and clasped him gently by the arm. Then the spirit turned and made for the window, which opened before them. Scrooge realized in a panic that the spirit meant for them to leave through the open window, which was on the 2nd floor. Oh, I am a mortal spirit and liable to fall. Bear but a touch of my hand on your heart, and you shall be upheld in more than this. As the spirit spoke, it gently placed its hand on Scrooge's chest and wondrously they passed through the wall of the bedchamber and stood of a sudden upon an open country road with fields on either side. The city had vanished, and along with it the darkness and fog. It was of a sudden a bright, clear, cold winter day, with snow upon the ground. Oh, Spirit, good heavens! I was bred in this place. I was a boy here. Scrooge was then conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and cares, long, long forgotten. Your lip is trembling, and what is that upon your cheek? A tear, said the spirit. The cold winter air stings my eyes. It's nothing, nothing. Oh, said the spirit. Now look, the market town where you were a boy. Do you remember the way? Remember it? I could walk it blindfold. Look, the winding river, the bridge, the square, and the little church. Do you remember the school where you lived and studied? Oh, too well. A chilly, barren, dark place with too little to eat. Look, then, at the back of the house, see the nearly deserted, melancholy room. Empty, save for a young boy reading near a feeble fire. He was a lonely boy, neglected by his friends, left alone there at school again at Christmas time, unwanted at home. Yes, my young forgotten self. No, don't make me think of that now. What's the matter? Nothing. It's just, there was a young boy singing a carol at my door last night. I should have liked to have given him something, that's all. I see. Let's see another Christmas. Scrooge's former self grew larger as the room became darker and more dirty. The panels shrank, the windows cracked, and fragments of plaster fell, clump, from the ceiling. How all this was brought about, Scrooge knew no more than you or I do. He only knew that it was quite correct. There he was, alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. He walked up and down, despairingly, this former young Scrooge. Scrooge looked at the ghost, and with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously toward the door. It opened, and a little girl, much younger than Scrooge, came running in, throwing her arms about his neck and often kissing him. "I have come to take you home, dear brother," said the little girl. "Home, little Fan? Yes, home for good. But first, you ought to be together. We're to be together all the Christmas long, and have the merriest time in all the world. Oh, Father is so much kinder, Ebby, that home is like heaven. He sent me in a coach to bring you, and you're never to come back here, ever again, Ebenezer." She clasped her hands around his neck. She clapped and laughed and dragged him toward the door, and he, nothing loath to go, accompanied her. Your little sister, Fan, always a delicate creature, whom a breath of air might have withered, but she had a large heart. So she had, little Fan. She died a woman, I think, and had, I believe, children. One child. True, your nephew. Yes. Although they had but that moment left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge, "Do you know it?" "Know it? Why, I apprenticed here." They went in. At the sight of an old gentleman in a white wig sitting behind a high desk, Scrooge cried out, Why, it's old Fezziwig, bless his heart. It's Fezziwig, alive again. And there's Dick Wilkins, to be sure. Dick was very much attached to me, he was." Just then, old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. Yo-ho, my boys! No more work tonight, boys. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas Eve, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up. Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. You wouldn't believe how these two fellows went at it. It was done in a minute. The floors were swept and watered. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped on the fire, and the warehouse was snug and warm and bright as any ballroom, as bright as any safe place could be on a winter's night. Then in came a fiddler with a music book. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast, substantial smile. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In they all came, one after another, Mr. Fezziwig calling out their names and calling to his wife to join him. Mrs. Fezziwig! Oh, Mr. Fezziwig! And the dancing began. Round and up and down they went. Oh, all of them led by the Fezziwigs, with their vast, substantial smiles which cost nothing at all. The festivities went on, and there were tables heaped with roast beef and cold ham and all manner of cakes and mince pies and fruit pies and fresh fruit and, of course, plenty of beer. Oh, the dancing and joy went on and on. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Fezziwig and his wife wished all of them, all their employees and their friends, a Merry Christmas, and parted from them as happy as they could be. During this whole time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul had been in the scene, and with his former self, he remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. The spirit watching this remarked, "A small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude." Small? Yes. Why is it not? He spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves such fond remembrances and praise? Oh, Spirit, it isn't that, Spirit. He had the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome. The happiness he gave is quite as great as if it had cost a fortune, don't you? Oh. What's the matter? Nothing particular. Something, I think. No, it's just... I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all. Well, my time grows short. Quick. With this word from the Spirit, there was produced an immediate effect, for again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of his life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl, in whose eyes there were tears. Oh, Ebenezer, it means little to you that another idol has displaced me. What idol has displaced you? A golden one. This is the even-handed dealings of the world, then. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and yet it professes to condemn the pursuit of wealth. Oh, Ebenezer, I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one, until the master passion gain engrosses you. I am not changed toward you. You are changed, Ebenezer. Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so. You were another man then. I was a boy. Your own feelings tell you that you have changed. Tell me, Ebenezer, would you seek me out and tried to win me now. You think not? I would gladly think otherwise if I could. But even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl, you who weigh everything by gain. Oh, Ebenezer, with a full heart and for the love of him you once were, I released you of your promise. May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me? One shadow more. No, no more. I do not wish to see it. Take me back. But the relentless ghost pinioned Scrooge by both arms and forced him to turn and observe what happened next. They saw another scene and place, a room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort and good cheer. Next to a winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like the last that Scrooge believed it was the same until he saw her. Her, now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The room was filled with laughter as the two women chatted. Then the master of the house arrived home, his arms laden with gaily wrapped packages. The daughter jumped up and kissed her father and mother good night and went off to bed. Scrooge, having observed all this, wondered to himself, what if this were his home? What if a creature like this child had called him father, and had been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life? As he thought this, his sight grew very dim indeed, until he saw the husband turn to his wife and say, smiling, "Oh, Belle, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon. Who was it? Guess." "Oh, how can I, dear?" "Oh, tut, don't I know? Mr. Scrooge?" "Mr. Scrooge it was, dear. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up and he had a candle lit inside, I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat, all alone, quite alone in the world, I do believe." The man reached out, took his wife's hand, and they quietly but happily retired for the night. "Spirit, spirit, remove me from this place! Haunt me no more!" "These are but shadows of the things that have been, Mr. Scrooge. They are what they are. Do not blame me." "Take me back! I can bear no more!" Scrooge turned upon the ghost and tried to struggle with it, but the spirit offered no resistance. Instead, suddenly, as Scrooge grasped it around his waist, its light collapsed toward the floor, and although Scrooge tried to cover the light with his hands, it spread across the floor in an unbroken flood of light. Scrooge was spent from trying to reach all of these little points of light upon the floor. He was exhausted from his exertions. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness, and further, he was conscious of being returned to his own bedroom, and barely had time to reel to bed, before he sank into a heavy sleep. Awakening in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, Scrooge sat up in bed to get his thoughts together. He turned cold as he began to wonder which of his bed curtains this new specter would draw back. So he put them aside with his own hands and established a sharp lookout all around the bed. He wished to challenge the spirit on the moment of its appearance, and did not wish to be taken by surprise and made nervous. Now, being prepared for almost anything, from a baby to a rhinoceros, he was by no means prepared for nothing. Consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came.
except a blaze of ruddy light which fell upon the center of his bed. This being only light, it was more alarming than a dozen ghosts. After much puzzling, he began to realize that the source and secret of the ghostly light came from the adjoining room. So he got up, put on his slippers, and shuffled softly to the door. The moment his hand was on the knob, a strange voice called him by name. Ebenezer! Ebenezer Scrooge! Opening the door just a crack, Scrooge peeked in. It was his own room, no doubt, but it had undergone a remarkable transformation. The walls and ceilings were hung with living greenery. Bright red berries glistened, while crisp leaves of holly, ivy, and mistletoe reflected the light, as if many little mirrors were scattered all about. And a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney of the fireplace. Heaped upon the floor in the corner to form a kind of throne were all manner of meats and sweets and fruit, and barrels of holiday punch. Reclining in easy state upon this throne, there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see. He bore a glowing torch in a shape not unlike a horn of plenty, which he held high up to shed light on Scrooge as he came peeping around the door. Come in, and know me better, man. Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head. I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me. Scrooge did so reverently. The ghost was clothed in one simple green robe bordered with white fur. Upon its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial young face, its sparkling eyes, its open hand, and its cheery voice. You have never seen the like of me before. Never, said Scrooge. You have never walked forth with the other members of my family, meaning my elder brothers, born in these latter years. I don't think I have. Have you had many brothers, Spirit? Nearly 1,800. Oh, a tremendous family to provide for. Oh, Spirit, conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learned a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it. The genial spirit nodded its head and said, Touch my robe. Scrooge did as he was told. The room and all it contained vanished instantly, and they stood of a sudden in the city streets on Christmas morning. It was a sunny day, with a light snow falling. They saw people going happily to and fro on their holiday errands. As they watched, most people exchanged cordial greetings as they went on their way to shops or church or family. But once or twice, when there were angry words between some of the people, the spirit waved its torch, and their mood and good humor was restored directly, and they went on their way remarking that it was a shame to quarrel on Christmas Day. It was with infectious pleasure that the good spirit worked this magic, and it was with childlike wonder that Scrooge watched. With Scrooge still holding the spirit's robe, they made their way to the threshold of Scrooge's clerk. The spirit smiled broadly as he blessed Bob Cratchit's dwelling with a wave of his torch. Ooh, think of that, Spirit. My clerk, Bob Cratchit, with but 15 shillings a week, and a wife and family, and... The spirit of Christmas present blesses his four-room house. Yes. Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit to spread the tablecloth, assisted by Belinda, second of her daughters, while Peter plunged a testing fork into the saucepan of bubbling potatoes. The two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose and known it for their own. Whatever has got your father? You precious father, then, Mrs. Cratchit said, and your brother Tiny Tim, and Martha weren't as late last Christmas by half an hour. Here's Martha, mother, cried the two young Cratchits. Hurrah, there's such a goose, Martha. Sit ye down before the fire. You must be froze, Lord bless me, said Mrs. Cratchit. No, 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 there's father coming, cried the little ones. Hide, Martha, hide, let's fool Daddy. So Martha hid herself, as in came Bob, with at least 3 feet of comforter hanging down before him. After him came Tiny Tim. Alas for Tim, he used a little crutch, and had his legs supported by an iron brace. Why, where's our Martha, mother? Said Bob. No coming, Wobbit, replied Mrs. Cratchit. No coming upon Christmas Day. Here I am, father, said Martha, coming out from behind the closet door, not wanting to see her father disappointed. They all had a good laugh at the joke, and the children hustled Tim off to the wash-house. How did little Tim behave in church? Said Mrs. Cratchit. Oh, as good as gold and better, my dear. Sometimes, you know, though, he gets so thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things. He told me coming home that he hoped people saw him in church because he is a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Our Tiny Tim, he is growing so strong and hearty. These quiet moments were loudly broken by the sound of the children returning from the kitchen and the older ones returning from the baker's with the goose. The table was set, grace was said, and dinner began. Oh, there was never such a goose. Its tenderness and flavor, size and cheapness were the themes of universal admiration. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. And then the pudding. Oh, yes, Mrs. Cratchit's pudding. Oh, a wonderful pudding, my dear, wonderful. When dinner was finished, the cloth was cleared, the floor swept, and the fire made up. Bob attended to a jug of hot punch, while apples and oranges were put upon the table, and a small shovelful of chestnuts were put upon the fire. The family gathered round the hearth. The punch was poured into their mismatched collection of chipped goblets and custard cups. These were passed about, and Bob proposed. A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us, which the family echoed, Tim being the last to say, God bless us, every one. Now, Tim sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered hand in his, for he loved the child so, and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him. A toast to Mr. Scrooge, said Cratchit. I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. The founder of the feast, indeed, cried Mrs. Cratchit. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, I would. My dear, the children, Christmas Day, said Mr. Cratchit. Oh, it should be upon Christmas Day, when one drinks to the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. Nobody knows better than you, poor Robert. Oh, but I'll drink his health for the day's sake, and for yours. To Mr. Scrooge, long life to him. The children followed in this toast, though half-heartedly. But little Tim exclaimed, however, quite brightly, to Mr. Scrooge. Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live. I see a vacant seat in the poor chimney corner, and a carefully preserved crutch without an owner. No, kind spirit, say he will be spared. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted back to him by the spirit, and he was overcome with penitence and grief. As the vision of the Cratchits faded, the last image that Scrooge saw was the shining little face of Tiny Tim. There is much to see and not much time. We must move swiftly, said the spirit. Lead me where you will, spirit. Lead me where you will. Good. Hold my robe. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes and other places they visited, but all with happy end. For wherever they went, people delighted in the remembrance of the Spirit and his brothers before him. None observed the day with greater glee than Scrooge's nephew Fred, who entertained a roomful of party guests.
He said Christmas was a humbug, as I live.
Fred.
He's a comical old fellow, that's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. I'm sorry for him. His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. And he hasn't the satisfaction that he is ever going to benefit us with it. The consequence of his not making merry with us is that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him, and I think I shook him yesterday.
Great gales of laughter rose from the assemblage at the very notion that Fred could shake old Scrooge. Then the party guests gathered round the piano and harp and sang and played to their heart's delight. And as the strains of music sounded, all the things the ghosts had shown Scrooge came upon his mind. He softened more and more. He thought of Marley, his boyhood home, his school, Fezziwig, his lost love, and lastly, of little Tiny Tim. But the guests didn't devote the entire evening to music, oh no. There were highly irregular games of blind man's buff and buckets of laughter during the countless rounds of a game of questions called Yes and No. Scrooge, invisible to all but the spirit, joined in the fun, jumping about and laughing and hollering out answers like a boy. When the spirit motioned that it was time to go, Scrooge begged, "Oh, no, spirit, just one more game, 1/2 hour more, please," and launched again madly into guessing out loud with the rest of the guests at yet another round of yes and no. Finally, the party was parched and ready for a drink of mulled wine. Nephew Fred raised his glass.
I give you Uncle Scrooge. A Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year to the old man. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge would have returned the toast, but the whole scene faded away, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. All that he saw changed Scrooge greatly inside, while outwardly he remained the same. But he noticed that the spirit grew older, clearly older, for the spirit's brown hair had turned gray, and his face had begun to wrinkle. As the chimes rang 11:15, Scrooge turned and asked the ghost, "Are spirits' lives so short, spirit?" "My life upon this globe is very brief. It ends tonight." "Tonight?" "Tonight, Ebenezer, at midnight. Hark, the time is drawing near." The wind began to howl, and from beneath the folds of the spirit's robe, 2 pairs of tiny, withered hands reached out imploringly to Scrooge. "Forgive me, spirit, but I see something strange protruding from beneath your robe." From the folds of his garment, the spirit revealed 2 wretched children, yellow, ragged, shriveled, and hideous. They knelt down at its feet, clinging to him. "Spirit, are they yours?" "They are man's. The boy is ignorance, the girl is want. Beware them both, but most of all, beware this boy, for on his brow I see written doom." "Oh, spirit, have they no refuge or resource?" "Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?" Again, Scrooge cringed at the biting sound of his own words repeated back to him. The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about to see the ghost of Christmas present, and saw it not. As the last stroke of the clock ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, coming like a mist along the ground toward him. The phantom approached slowly, gravely, silently,
It was tall and stately, shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, and its very form, and left nothing visible save one outstretched hand. When the spirit came near to Scrooge, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. Am I in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come? The spirit answered not, but pointed downward with its hand. You are about to show me shadows of things that have not yet happened, but will happen in the time before us. The upper portion of the spirit's garment was contracted for an instant in its fold, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer Scrooge received. Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any other spectre I have seen, but as I know your purpose is to do me good, I am prepared to bear your coming and do it with a thankful heart. But will you not speak to me? It gave no reply. The hand was pointed before them as before. Oh, then lead on, spirit. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me. Lead on, spirit. The phantom moved away. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its garment, which bore him up and carried him along with the spirit. They entered of a sudden the heart of the city and stopped before a knot of businessmen, men that Scrooge vaguely recognized. No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead, said one of the businessmen. Old Scratcher's got his own at last. I thought he'd never die. And I wonder, what has he done with his money? I haven't heard. Hasn't left it to me, that's all I know. You know, it's liable to be a very cheap funeral. I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer. I don't mind going if a lunch is provided, but I must be fed if I make up the party. Well, bye-bye, bye-bye. Speakers and listeners strolled away. Scrooge was surprised that the spirit attached importance to conversation so trivial as this. He could think of no one to whom it could apply, but not doubting that it had some latent moral for his own improvement, he resolved to treasure up every word he heard, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared. Next, the spirit conducted Scrooge into an obscure part of the town, which he had never seen before. The whole quarter reeked of crime, with filth and misery. Far into this area of infamous resort was a low-browed pawn shop where iron, old rags, bottles, and bones were bought. The spirit bade Scrooge to enter the lowly shop, where he observed a laundress selling to a pawnbroker bed curtains, rings and all, a large blanket, and a brand-new dress shirt that she bragged she had removed from the body of a man left alone and forgotten in death in his own bed. As the broker paid the woman, he called her Alice by name and praised her work, to which she replied, This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive, to profit us when he was dead. Spirit, this is a fearful place, with dreadful people. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Now, I beg you, let me see some tenderness connected with the death. Let us go. The ghost then conducted him through several streets, and as they went along, Scrooge again looked to find himself, but was nowhere to be seen. Soon they stood before Bob Cratchit's house. Entering, they found the mother and children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in the corner. The mothers and daughters were engaged in sewing, and Peter sat reading from the Bible. Just then, the mother laid her sewing down and put her hand to her face. This sewing hurts my eyes. It makes them weak by candlelight. And I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home. It must be near his time. Much past, answered Peter. But I think he walks a little slower than he used to, Mother, these last few evenings. I have known him to walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed. But he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so, that it was no trouble. No trouble. Oh, and there's your father now. She'd hurried out to meet him. Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the sewing work upon the table and praised their industry. He then went upstairs into the room above and sat quietly in a chair close beside the child's bed. Holding his little boy's cold hand, he wept. My little child. Poor Bob. When he had thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the little face. Reconciled to what had happened, Bob rejoined his family, who drew about him by the fire, and promised each other they would remember Tiny Tim and all his love. Spectre, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. The ghost conveyed him then through the streets of the town. Scrooge saw himself nowhere. Then the phantom stopped, spread its robe before him for a moment like a black wing, and withdrawing it, revealed the heavy iron gate of a graveyard. The spectre stood among the graves and pointed down to one particular stone. Scrooge advanced toward it, trembling. Spirit, before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point, answer me one question only. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they shadows of the things that may be only? Still, the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. O Spirit, man's courses will foreshadow certain ends, but if the courses be departed from, the ends will change. Say it is true. Say it is thus with what you show me. The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge drew closer still until, following the pointed finger, read upon the stone, Ebenezer Scrooge! No, Spirit! Hear me! I am not the man I was! I will not be the man I must have been! Oh, Spirit! Why show me this if I am past all hope? For the first time, the hand appeared to shake as Scrooge fell down upon the ground before the giant spirit. Oh, good Spirit! Your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. Oh, Spirit, I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on that stone. In his agony, Scrooge caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but Scrooge was strong and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him, holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed. He saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. Oh, it shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. And best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. Oh, Spirit, I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out their lessons. No, not the lessons that they teach me. No, Spirit. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and Christmas time be praised. Oh, what's this? Oh, my bed curtains. They are not torn down. They are here, rings and all. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. But I don't know what to do. I'm as light a feather. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. His hands were busy with his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Oh, and he laughed. And really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh. A most illustrious laugh. I don't know what day it is, do I? I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind, I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. He was checked in his transports by the sound of the church bells ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. He rushed to the window, throwing it open. He stuck his head out. Oh, no fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold. Oh, golden sunlight, merry bells, glorious, glorious. He spied a young boy dressed in his Sunday best, passing below his window. Oh, why, boy, what's today? Eh? What's today, my fine fellow? To die? Why, Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow. Hello. Do you know the poulterers in the next street? I should hope I do. An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging there yesterday? Why, the one as big as me. What a delightful boy. Yes, my buck. It's hanging there now, sir. Oh, it is. Good. Go and buy it. Go on now, you're fooling me. No, I'm quite in earnest. Go and buy it, and tell them to bring it here, that I may give them directions where to take it. Come back in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown. The boy was off like a shot. I'll give it to Bob Cratchit. I'll send it to Bob Cratchit. He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Scrooge went down to the front door to meet the boy and the poulterer's man. As he stood there awaiting their arrival, the knocker of the door caught his eye. Oh, I shall love this knocker as long as I live. What an honest expression it has on its face. Hello, Mr. Scrooge. Here's the turkey. Oh, why? It's too big to carry to Camden Town, my boy. You must have a cab. It was with a chuckle that he said this, and with the chuckle that he paid for the turkey, and paid for the cab, and tipped the poulterer's man, and with a chuckle that he recompensed the boy. And that dispensed, he chuckled till he cried. Oh, he dressed himself all in his best, and then at last got out into the streets. He looked so irresistibly pleasant that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "A Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge often afterwards said that of all the cheerful sounds he had ever heard, those were the most cheerful in his ears. He had not gone far when, coming toward him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had come the day before to his office looking for a donation. It sent a pang through his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him, but he knew what he must do, and he did it. My dear sir, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you. Mr. Scrooge? Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. However, allow me to ask your pardon, and will you have the goodness to accept from me Oh, Lord bless me, Mr. Scrooge. I was serious. Oh, not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Oh, I don't know what to say. Oh, don't say anything. Come and see me. Will you come and see me? Oh, I will. Well, thank you, sir. Thank you. I'm much obliged to you. I thank you very much. I thank you 1,000 times. Bless you. Scrooge went to church and walked about the streets and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head, and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of houses and up to the windows, and found that everything could give him pleasure. Oh. In the afternoon, he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door 12 times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it.
Why, bless my soul.
said nephew Fred.
Who's this?
It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I have come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let you in? There could be no more wonderful surprise. Come in, come in. Everybody, Uncle Ebenezer. Merry Christmas, Uncle.
Taking his uncle's hand, it's a mercy that he didn't shake his arm off. Scrooge felt at home in 5 minutes. Wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. Oh, but he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late, that was the thing he had set his heart upon. Oh, and he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half past his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come in. Cratchit's hat was off before he opened the door. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he was trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
Hello, Mr. Cratchit. What do you mean coming in here at this time of day? I'm very sorry, sir. I am behind my time. You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please, Mr. Cratchit. Oh, Mr. Scrooge, it's only once a year, sir. It should not be repeated, I promise. I was making rather merry yesterday, you see, sir. Now, I tell you what, my friend, I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, and therefore, said Scrooge as he leapt from his stool and gave Bob such a dig in his waistcoat that it set the poor man reeling, and therefore, I am about to raise your salary. But, sir... A Merry Christmas, Robert. A merrier Christmas, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. And we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a hot cup of Christmas punch. Now, make up the fires, Bob, and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. Yes, sir. Oh, thank you, sir.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city ever knew. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them. For his own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived on the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that truly be said of us, and of all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one.